live for 1 second for a test, then we'll go on pause.
We're going live?
We're going to go live just for a test.
She's going live just for a test.
Make sure we're... Okay.
Good evening. It is 6:04, and it is Monday, July 30th, 2018, for the Woodland City Council workshop. And will the clerk please take the roll this evening?
Councilmember Graham? Here. Councilmember Rounds?
Here.
Councilmember Plaza?
Here.
Councilmember Chapman?
Here.
Councilmember Humbert? Here. Councilmember Fredericks?
Here.
Councilmember Benjamin?
Here.
All right, everyone's accounted for. Moving on through our workshop this evening, we've got a few things to discuss. First up, the Safety Committee has provided you an update on our fireworks. Oh, he hasn't yet. I'm sorry. Let's start with that and get that over with. Yeah, let's get that. He has an update for you this evening.
Is that on here?
No, but we're not going to discuss it. There was a mistake, or not a mistake, there was a misunderstanding on what was going to be discussed this evening when it comes to the fireworks ordinance, so it was taken off. So this evening, you are being provided an update, proposed changes to Woodland Municipal Code regarding the fireworks. So you can take this home. It sounds like there was minimal changes, and it will be coming back to full council, correct? Mr. Chief Jackson.
Yeah, just very quick. So this is the current code, current municipal code of fireworks with the proposed changes. The quick summary is stuff that is duplicative. The city adopts the International Fire Code, which is also the state fire code. The city adopts that. Language that was duplicated, we've eliminated from here, so we're not in a constant battle of trying to keep one updated with the other. It just simply makes reference to. There was a slight change in times as well, with no sales on the 5th was a change, and also looking at that was essentially the change, the sales on the 5th, and then putting a restriction on discharge of fireworks on public land aside from residential streets, so the folks couldn't go to a park or a school. There is an exception for a public display permit with a licensed pyrotechnic. So that's a quick summary of the changes. We'll bring it back for council. It'll either be at the next meeting or the meeting after. We'll look at timing on it.
Mr. Fredericks?
So, do we have the option as a council, before it gets to a regular session of the council, to discuss the discharge period of fireworks? And if so, when would we do that?
We can do that during the meeting. Would you like to, because this went to public safety for a recommendation, and then we could go into a workshop during regular council meeting to discuss that and then take action if council would prefer.
And the timing of this, if whatever is adopted, would not go into effect next year, it'd be the following year.
It's
2020.
One year from the date it's adopted.
Okay.
Yeah.
After the
Well, I think it'd be appropriate to have as much
Input?
outreach as we can to folks that want to provide input into this.
Okay.
But I would like to discuss the discharge period because I think it's too lengthy.
So would you prefer then, it sounds like maybe a workshop with full council?
And then we could do
Yeah,
vote the following meeting.
yes, or sent back to committee for revisit and then brought forward for action. Give it a little bit more time, and our community to step forward and provide their input as well. Okay. All right.
I can hand out two other pieces if that
Okay.
works for you. So, so that is the proposed change. I'll give you two other pieces. In Cowles County, there are no communities that have changed from the state standard for sales and discharge. Clark County has a number of restrictions that differ. So I have, this is a copy of what Ridgefield and La Center did, and Ridgefield includes kind of a comprehensive thing of what all of the other cities in Clark County do. Ridgefield, La Center made some changes this
This
year.
is thick.
And they lowered the discharge. time difference. And then the only other piece you can, if you're interested, is information on fireworks seasons. This year, our responses were not that significant. We had one response city-wise. We had one response in each of the 3 cities we protect on the 4th of July. It was a lower response than normal for fireworks, and I don't know if that's attributed
Was that
to the
complaints or?
those are response to incidents, fires or injuries.
Okay.
Typically, we have more than that this year.
Okay.
So we'll plan on a
Workshop and then action following. Does council, do we have time, is there a workshop scheduled for, how tight is our timeline on Monday? Is there a lot?
Be able to accommodate it.
Okay. Will council be prepared on Monday to have a workshop on fireworks then? Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Let's do a workshop this coming Monday. And then, what's that? Oh, and then we'll, once it's decided where to go from there, then either end up in committee or end up at the next council meeting for action.
Would you like my presence for anything else?
Are you asking to leave, Mr. Jackson?
I was hoping you kind of,
I'm offering to stay.
Only if you take these cookies back to the desk.
I was hoping you'd stay for section B.
Section B, committees and calendars. Oh. When do you meet now? Do you meet on a council night?
I'm joking.
Oh. You already
See if
meet
you
some.
wanted to
Okay.
hang out and talk
You're
about
fine.
committees.
You're excused. Yeah.
Yeah, what he can.
Yeah, I'm out. Take some with you, please.
Wait a minute.
You want those back? Please bring those back, Chief Jackson. Pass them down. Thank you very much.
I'm good. I'm good.
No, it's fine. I've got ice cream in the back as well. Thank you, Mr. Jackson, Chief Jackson.
Mr. Fredericks will fight over him. He's already trying to get it.
Those were compliments of Mrs. Rounds and Mrs. Larson this afternoon. All right.
And Mr. Finn.
And Mr. Finn. I was bamboozled into, oh wait, we're being recorded, never mind. My wife seems to think that I just happened to grab those off the table. Come home with it. She doesn't realize that I paid for them. She does now. Nah, she doesn't watch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Jackson. Have a safe evening. All right, moving on to workshop. We've got 2 items to discuss this evening. Thank you for indulging with the fireworks discussion there real quick. We'll be discussing budget, and then also workshop item B, we'll be discussing committees and calendar. I think the goal with committees and calendar is to attempt to get all committees to gather on a council evening, so we're not spreading it out to the month, and first and third Monday of the month is the goal there, if we can make that work. So that will be the discussion there. So this evening, we'll be talking about some budget, so we'll start there. I'm going to kick this to Mr. Boyce.
Okay, so the intent of the workshop is to talk about the 2019 budget. When we had our retreat, we indicated that we would have a meeting or a workshop with council to discuss wants and needs for the 2019 fiscal year. We provided some information to you. Some was in the packet, some I put on your desk. You received some financials on the current budget, where it stands, and we are pretty much where we thought we'd be at this point. So I don't want to belabor all the figures. We did make one change to the, I believe it was the expenditure comparison. We forgot to include a subtitle in the final total for the general fund. So we updated the website, and the final total is $5,671,493. So we missed a subtotal in the general fund, so I wanted to point that out, that correction. So, you know, I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but I wanted to, you know, just summarize that we're about where we thought we'd be at this point. We have done a few budget amendments, but really we're on track according to plan. So that gives you an idea of where we are right now. In the packet, I also included a graph that shows fund balance, and on this graph, we're showing fiscal years 2015 through the current 2018. So the 2016, and 2017 are actual numbers, and 2018 is the estimates of where we intend to be at the end of the year. I've included the general fund, the park fund, the street fund, and the general reserve fund. The reason I'm including those funds and excluding others is that these funds are all receive property tax or sales tax, and city council can have the discretion of where those go to. So when we look at our fund balance, we look at it overall, and I've also, when you look at the 2018, you'll see the different columns. First is the fund name, the fund balance associated with each individual fund, expenditures that were appropriated for the fiscal year 2018, expenditures by month, months of reserve. So you can see overall in the total we have 2.42 months in reserve when looking at all funds together, and the percentage. So overall we have about 20% in reserve when you include all funds together. So it's kind of an interesting snapshot to see where we stand. Individually, I'd like to see more savings in the larger fund balance for the general fund. The park fund, you can see back in 2017 we had no reserve, so the park fund is maxing out. The street fund is of some concern. I think most of you remember last year we decided to repave Old Pacific Highway. Mike Strock, our Public Works Director at the time, indicated that there were big concerns with that road and we may lose it if we didn't do something with it. We understood that would deplete our reserve in that fund. And this year we're seeing the consequences of that. I've got our Public Works Director talking about some general maintenance projects that she's going to have a tough time getting done this year. So, but that was understood when we made that change. Next year, the fund reserve, the fund balance will increase. But really, the street fund is a concern because year after year, we don't really gain the revenues to cover all of the expenditures that the Public Works Director would like to. Council knows that. Council went to the voters a couple times to try to fund the Transportation Benefit District, which the voters said no. So, so anyway, it gives a snapshot. If you look at the graph, you can see the overall fund balance between those funds going down in 2016 and then leveling off between 2017 and 2018. So we did make some changes and some cuts to maintain that fund balance level, and we're going to try to maintain, if not increase fund balance as we move forward. Any questions on that? I knew it.
Yes. On this page here that you don't have listed when you indicate your street fund, how come on this page, see this? Where is this?
I'm trying to see.
Street fund graph.
This is a
Yeah.
handout from.
Right.
I'm assuming this is tonight.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Can you explain the large delta between?
Well, let me jump into
revenue and
these.
expenditure, because it goes totally against, when I'm looking at this, it
Right.
goes totally against your narrative that you just spoke about when it comes to the street fund.
Right. So let me jump into those. So these were some preliminary projections, being ultra conservative on where the revenues are going to go, and a little bit liberal on where the expenditures could go. So the intent of this is to show if, we just stayed the course and the numerous assumptions that were made and those numbers came true, that's what would happen. So last year, because we depleted the fund balance, we also reduced the expenditures in that fund. And we do have more revenue coming in than expenditures, simply because we made that reduction and we're saving for the future. So the revenue is exceeding what the expenditures are, and that's by design. We try to save up for larger projects. The time in between those larger projects is getting greater because of the revenue. But in order to get that fund balance higher for fiscal year 2019, we had to reduce the expenditures for 2018. So we do have more revenue coming in than expenditures in the street fund, eyeing those larger projects like Old Pacific Highway that will be done in the future. So over the next few years, we'll be building reserve, keeping expenditures fairly low, but we use that street fund as, sort of a savings account for those large future projects.
Historically, the council has had a larger project probably every 3 to 4 years.
And so
Build it, spend it, build it, spend it.
Right. And we just spent it all, so now it's
So you have-
time to build.
So you have your regular operations and maintenance, smaller projects, and then you have a larger project that is.
So if I'm reading this correctly, then you're saying that there's roughly $600,000 in revenue that we're putting into this account that is a safety net or a big project per year? Because I show expenditures of 176 and revenue of 780. That's
Right, and so when looking at the expenditure and revenue numbers, we backed out the fund balance. It still includes transfers between funds and whatnot. But the intent with all of these projections is to show where the trend on expenditures is, where the trend on revenue is. But you're right, we're exceeding expenditure, or the revenues are exceeding expenditures, and that's the way the fund naturally operates. Like the clerk treasurer said, there are cycles where we save up for larger projects. We just spent last year on a larger project, Old Pacific Highway. Now we're in the rebuild phase.
Can you explain why 2018, where it says expenditures, street fund, 681,573, why that does not match this page? It says 176,376.
So 173,189. This,
No.
The one beneath
Street fund.
oh, I'm sorry. I was looking
See where
at-
it says expenditures 681,573 for 2018? And then on the handout today, it says 176,376 for expenditures. Why
Right.
is there a difference?
And I believe the difference was that the I believe it is. I believe that's correct, that it's fund balance and transfers. I'd want to revisit that just to make sure I'm giving you the correct information.
So one's with
This,
and one's
this
without?
came off this amount came off the May totals. So I'll have to go back and just make sure of that, but I believe I included the fund balance in
That looks a little bit more realistic right there than this, because I don't remember there being a $600,000 delta between expenditures and revenue in the street fund.
That's probably
Right.
total budget, and this 176 is, I think he said he took out the fund balance and
So I'll confirm that for you and get that to you. But, and my apologies if I made an error, but I think what I have is correct. I just need to get you the,
Well, it's
The
important
backup
from a narrative
information.
standpoint to understand the difference between what reality is on expenditures and revenue when it comes from a street funding perspective.
right.
That's all.
Understood. So the rest of the projections in that same handout I gave you, the first page shows the general fund expenditures versus revenues with fund balance pulled out. And again, I'm making a lot of assumptions about revenue, about expenditures. The main force driving expenditures in the general fund are benefits, salaries and benefits. And as you know, we have we have one union contract open right now and 2 others ready to be negotiated, so I'm making some assumptions about 3% increases going forward in those 3 years. That may prove to be accurate or not. Time will tell. On the revenue side, I'm projecting 1.5% increases in revenue. Most of that is driven by property tax and sales tax, and I still need to do a little more investigation about where those will end up. Property tax, we're able to get 1% increase year after year, plus new construction. So a little more information has to be put into that. Again, these are preliminary numbers that are meant to give you more of a ballpark. The Parks Fund is on the next page. And again, you see expenditures outpacing revenues. As we move forward through the budgeting process, we're going to be taking these into consideration, and there are some things we can do, some things we can't do. But really, the intent of all of these is just to show overall trends. The General Reserve Fund, following the Street Fund, you'll see a little dip in revenue between 2018 and 2019, and that's because there was a loan repayment from another fund that was made in 2018 and won't continue through the remaining years. And again, with the General Reserve Fund, the major sources for monies in that fund are real estate excise tax funds. Gambling tax used to be a major component of this fund. It's down significantly because of the opening of the casino, and we predict, that revenue to just increase at a very slight pace. So that is meant just to give you ideas of the trends. As you can see, we're going to have to make some changes to make sure expenditures meet current revenues. And we're making assumptions that there aren't new revenues coming in. We're just projecting property tax, sales tax, and a modest increase on other fees that are charged for services. So, all right.
Questions?
Mr. Fredericks?
Sorry.
Nope.
On the sales tax and other revenue components that affect the general fund, how are those trending this year versus what was forecast?
All right, so they are, pull up the sheet here. Pull it up on the Okay, so in the general fund, you see here on the comparison, the first two columns with numbers, that's June 30th, 2018. The last two columns under the blue, that's the same time, last fiscal year, 2017,
So this is through the month of June then?
through the month of June. So you can see in property taxes, we've taken in $393,000 that was distributed to the general fund. The budgeted amount is $926,000. Last year, very close. There's a difference of $309 between the two fiscal years at this point in time. Sales tax, we had budgeted to receive $1.3 million this year. As of June 30th, we've received $744,000. Last year at this time, we had received $701,000.
So we're up 43,000 in sales tax this year,
Yeah, so
roughly?
right. So 42,983. If you look at the far right column, that gives you the difference between the two.
We are putting together a more detailed analysis showing some charts that we should have ready probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks, showing some of the comparisons as well. The thing to remember about sales tax too is some of it is one-time revenues, which could be based off of building and construction.
Hope that answered your
That's your
question.
Mr. Plaza?
Yeah, just have a real quick question real quick. Okay, this is my show. I don't know really how to read these things too well, but going back to the fund balance page that you had on there, page 31, of all the fund balances, we have a total of $1,340,000 with expenditures of $6,648,000. Where's the $5 million coming from to pay for those?
One moment, let me pull this up. Doesn't want to cooperate.
There you go.
There we go. So, if you could ask your question one more
For
time.
under 2018, we had a total of all the different fund places of $1,340,000
Right.
with expenditures of $6,648,000. I'm just curious where the $5 million comes from to pay for that.
Right, so basically, the fund balance is the measure of, it's like a savings account. So it's a measure of where you stand after you spend everything you think you'll spend and receive everything in revenue you think you'll receive.
Okay.
So it's a measure of the difference. So the revenues we have appropriated for 2018 cover that gap. It's just what's left over after those revenues are received and the expenditures are detracted.
So the $1,340,000 is what's left over after the $6 million is paid.
Correct.
Okay.
And before we go any further, Mr. Boyce, out of that general reserve fund, that one, I don't have my glasses on, one, whatever that is, that million something, within that, how much of that has already been dedicated funding that we can't use? It's not a true savings. We don't have $1 million in cash to just spend.
Well,
It's restricted.
There are some restricted revenues in that fund. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now to tell you what they are, but the REIT funds, the real estate excise tax funds, can only be used for certain expenditures. And can you help me on that, Mary?
So capital projects, streets, roads, bridges, there is some leeway for operations, but it is limited. We can use it to pay for the debt on our land that we do currently. Can't use it for vehicles and equipment.
Salaries and benefits? No, I'm just clarifying so everybody understands what that money is. Okay.
It's set out by the RCWs about
Okay.
what it's going to be on.
And-
Mostly related to capital type projects.
Okay. And council's policy at this time is for that reserve account, do we know that off the top of our head, what we're trying to get to? Sorry to
Yeah.
throw a wrench into the conversation. I just want to make sure everybody understands what that number represents, and it's not,
Our finance policy is 2 to 3 months of
Right.
operating revenue.
okay. Do we currently have 2 to 3 months of operating revenue?
Well, 2.42 is what it says.
2.42 months.
Okay. So we're
And
close, but we're not
That's
there.
looking overall. If you read the policy, a little bit closer, it talks more about the general fund as opposed to, by grouping the funds together like this, we're coming out and saying that, these are revenues that can be distributed by city council that are basically general government purposes, like the general fund. So, I think at some point we should review the financial policies with city council and the finance committee and see if they would like to make any changes to those. But right now, we're considering these funds that we have listed as, general fund, funds that could be used for any general government purpose.
So, per the state auditor's BAR's manual, we are reporting in a rolled up, is what we call it, state, which is what Pete is showing here. The roll up of all those together is classifying as general fund. So that's the reporting level we report at for the state auditor guidelines. Now, as we operate, we still track individually those funds for managerial purposes.
Mr. Fredericks?
Are we able to benchmark with other municipalities regarding a review of our financial policies and procedures to have just a secondary look at them? I think
Actually, I've been working on that, so I don't have a lot of the facts and figures ready to present yet, but when we started in with the police negotiation, I wanted to, check and see how we're doing with other jurisdictions, so that will be coming to you.
Okay.
I guess my point, so everyone's on board, that, and it sounds like it's there. It's one big umbrella, but within that umbrella, there's only certain things that you can spend that money on. Okay. All right. We don't have over $1 million in cash assets right now just to go out and spend on whatever.
Well, if we did go out and spend all those, we'd be in a situation like with the road fund.
Cash flow then for Painterville.
Yeah, so-
We'd be having interfund loans like crazy.
I know Mrs. Humbird can attest because she was there during it. When you go through a downturn in the economy and you have employees who are looking at you during budget season because, worse than that, where we're talking about whether or not we're able to keep them because our revenues are not keeping up with our expenditures, and you get a downturn in the economy where all of your tax gets hit, your revenue's coming in, and there are certainly some tough choices that have to be made, and so, yeah.
So looking at this, we're almost at our 3 months, and after 3 months, it should be a little bit easier. Not really.
Well, at our 3 months.
Yeah, you said 3 months of reserves. Isn't that the goal?
Yeah,
Is 3
it's-
months, and we're almost there.
Right, it's 2.42 right now.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So, the other thing I wanted to point out to council, I placed on your desk, I don't have, here we go. You see something that says final priorities. That came from the February 10th retreat. And I knew this would probably come up in discussion, so I wanted to remind everyone, these aren't all the things we decided to do. That's just the excerpt in the notes that what the final priorities were. but I wanted to bring that forward so the city council could see that when we start talking about 2019, where do we want to put our money. There was, the first bullet says increase level of succession plan, external analytics. I'm not sure the note taker totally captured what we were talking about, but a lot of it was, as you all know, we've had 3 different police chiefs talk about the need for additional people in the department. And a lot of the discussion centered around, how do we obtain additional revenue to man up the department, at least 2 officers and a sergeant. That was the main discussion. So I wanted to make sure that was clarified. We also talked about a city hall utility rate analysis, which is being advertised right now. Clerk's office, the organizational assessment in the clerk's office. Spoke with the Human Resource Committee at the last meeting about the scope of work. And transportation. As you all know, we have plenty of transportation issues with Exit 21, Scott Avenue Crossing, and everything in between. So those were the major priorities that council listed at that last meeting. So with that, I was hoping to generate some discussion from councilors about priorities they'd like to see for the 2019 budget, issues with the 2018 budget you'd like to see changed, or, I'm just trying to open the door for the discussion.
Mr. Frederick?
I guess it's kind of hard to have that discussion about what I'd like to have fun, because it's like my kids saying they want all these school clothes, and they'd like a new car, and they'd like all this stuff. Based upon what I've been provided here this evening, it looks as though we're having a difficult time keeping lights on in the home. Is that a fair assessment?
It's-
Because
yeah.
rather than what I want, it's what would I like to keep currently?
Right.
And how important is that to me? Because now I'm going through my household budget, and is cable important to me? Is maybe I don't do the maintenance on my cars every other month? I mean, that's the story I'm being told here, so it's difficult for me to come and say, hey, here's a priority I think we should look at that cost X.
And you're right. I mean, there are a number of great ideas that would be wonderful to fund, but as you know, budgets are all about prioritizing. Going into the 2019 budget, my priority is going to be to try to keep service levels where they are. We're not going to be doing a lot of extra enhancements, anything like that. We're going to be trying to maintain service levels. That's where we are. There are other things that we think are important that we'd like to look at, such as, police staffing levels, such as community development staffing levels. We've been having discussions about how busy that office really is, community development. And as you know, it's the front door to additional revenue, tax base. So, there are things we'd really like to do. Whether or not we'll be able to do all of them, it will be an uphill process, but those are the 2 main items that we'd like to enhance. Whether or not we'll be able to do that or not remains to be seen. But I agree with your statement.
I guess the only thing that I would ask for preliminary, just so we have it ready, is even if we want to bring this to the Finance Committee for preliminary discussion, I would like to see the difference between the revenue that we collect for fire versus what the true expenditure is, and then ideas to make up the difference between the two
Right.
There's a difference there, and I'd like to explore that. That might help us close the gap here, but that's obviously a difficult discussion that we're going to have from a revenue standpoint.
Right. Okay.
I think that would be important for at least the committee to take a look at it, make a recommendation to the full council.
Agreed.
Anyone else?
What you're doing and bringing more information will make it easier to decide if there's something in our priorities that you want to look at more closely. At this point, it's like you said, it's just maintaining.
Mr. Plaza?
I agree with what everybody else is saying. It's hard to come up with a wish list when you don't have the money to do anything with it. So, yeah, like we should put that off, I think. But the bigger question for me is, according to the meeting we had a couple weeks ago, where Mr. Goddard was talking about increasing the permit fees for businesses and whatnot coming in because we have the lowest in the region.
Right.
And I'm not expecting this to be answered, I'm just throwing this out there, is if, our permitting fees are so much lower, then why don't we have more businesses coming in, which would then increase our revenue? And, that makes no sense to me, and I don't know if that's something we can look into, or if it's just going to be a mystery, for the rest of our lives.
Well, and I'm not an expert, but I don't think the fees are always directly related to the business activity. I think some of it is market driven, and we've all seen Ridgefield grow and the housing in Ridgefield explode really, and you can see that growth from the Vancouver area moving north, and we're next in line, and now we have developers knocking on the door. So, looking at the trends as far as building permits and whatnot, you can see, it's starting to increase a little bit year after year. If some of these, depending what happens with the comp plan change, if some of these developments come into play, it's going to change our revenue situation and expenditure situation to a certain extent.
We need more business to help offset some of these costs.
Definitely.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think though that's part of a culture, and this is a culture that hasn't been really embraced, except in my mind. Probably how many years have you been here?
I'm on 2.5.
So 2.5 years ago, I think a mindset was changed that we are open for business. So whatever policies that we can drive and continue to work with the port to try to make sure that we have that attitude that we're open for business. And if there's an investment that needs to be made in community development, that we can show that if we do this, here's what your end result would be, I would certainly be willing to take a look at that if it was positive. We did our biosolids expense, the screw press.
Right.
We made an investment there, and I don't remember what the return on the investment was, but I think it's within 2 years, we'll start saving a considerable amount of money
Right.
in the sewer fund, I think is the fund. So I'd be interested to hear if staff has any recommendations that they think that where we might have to invest a little and maybe spend some of the general reserve fund to pay a little bit now to create efficiencies later. I'd certainly be willing to take a look at those. But it goes back to, and I agree with Carol and Mrs. Humbert on being open for business. And that's an attitude that it's a shift. It takes time. You're not going to have a bunch of people come run into the door until feedback starts going through the system that things are changing. I've heard from one developer last week, nothing but positives coming out. That is completely night and day different from what I heard, 3-4 4 years ago, someone was trying to come here and they would just bypass us because as soon as they got to City Hall, it was, you might as well have had the doors locked and the lights off.
Right. And we want to keep that positive buzz. And in that analysis, which we'll endeavor to do, there are going to be a lot of assumptions. You don't know what type of business is going to walk in the door and what type of either sales tax or property tax they might generate. We can make some assumptions and put together some numbers, but it's a difficult one to put together. So, the best we can do is let you know what our assumptions are, and if you agree with them, great. If not, we'll make changes. But some of the concern is, in a 2-week period, we had 9 new applications walk in the door for, our 2 people in the community development department to deal with. We have a full-time permit tech and then the director. There's a lot going on, and we want to make sure that positive buzz stays positive. I do see Travis working really hard to keep things on time and on track. I just worry about the department getting burnt out and things slowing down and us losing that positive buzz. We want to do everything we can to ensure that, because it does bring in new revenue. It brings in new property taxes, sales tax. So it's important.
You are right, and that's the one thing I have heard in the last 2 years, how open you have become. We're willing to work with people, but lately I've heard from a couple of people that we're coming up to date because our department isn't enough. So that was something that I wanted to bring up at some point.
Right.
What do we do to make that so that things go a little faster? It's still better than it was, and anybody you talk to will tell you that. And we have some amazing people looking at police and women, and that's pretty exciting.
It is.
And we don't want to lose that.
Right, exactly.
Mr. Goddard, we've had the conversation over the last few weeks on what the fix is, and hopefully we'll have that fix to council, if we can, especially through this exercise here, which with that department, we've kind of already, we haven't done the second part of that. What's the recommendation to invest now, but we don't know what the positive outcome is yet. So that assumption hasn't been made, but we are having those conversations with Mr. Goddard and his team currently.
So part of the revenue that's created, most of the revenue that's created for community development has to stay in community development, right?
Correct.
Does Mr. Goddard need some outside assistance to help him get unburied from this 9 or from all these applications that are coming in? Because I really don't want to burn him out either.
Right. Well, and that's part of the discussion. We also have these long-term planning goals. The comp plan amendments that are coming up are going to take an enormous amount of time. I had a discussion with Bill Fashing at the COG about, they hire planners also. Maybe there's a way we could contract a planner from them for these peak times when there's a lot to do. So we're looking at a myriad of different options, and it's we'll have to see where we land. But yeah, he needs help.
Okay. I just don't want it to get to a point where he's burnt out and fried,
Right.
and then we react and go, oh, now we have a problem.
Exactly. He's been indispensable, and we want to keep him around. So
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chapman.
Mr. Boyce, we've been discussing this, like industrial and then possible 500 homes being developed in the area and stuff like that. And we're already understaffed with the police force as it is now. At a head count ratio, has anybody looked at projection how much that would put us off even more, as in we can get like 6,000 more people in here, and we're still at the same force. We just, same force, we doubled our head count, and now we're really upside down.
we're still in the process of determining what the city's needs are if the city decides to go forward with some of these comp plan changes. And yeah, that will have to be part of the
I know
analysis.
it's great and everything.
not
I'd love to
just
bring it
water
back,
and
but I don't
sewer
want to
and
get so
transportation.
behind. We can't even the fire service will be the same way too. We'll be, we always house, and now we don't have as much fire support to help dollars too. Because I'm a little concerned about making sure we still have the same amount of saturated service. I want to bring it in, but we need to figure out.
There are definitely going to be impacts to the city of these proposed developments, and we're attempting to do our due diligence to make sure that all of the questions you folks will have can be answered. But, yeah, it's not just water, sewer,
Oh, yeah.
and transportation. You're right, there are services that we have to provide also.
But there is a big difference, though, between police and fire. Fire's going to get paid regardless, because it's a contract that's built into a set amount per your property tax. So the level of service will continue to rise. Alternatively, the police department is not tied to that at all, and that's the
It's
challenge.
unfortunate.
Yes,
Unfortunate.
it is.
That's where the challenge is going to be.
Yep.
But I guess I'm sensing that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that while we're going through the budget process, council still is concerned about the number of calls in the police department and having sufficient staff to deal with those calls. And I hope that's a safe assumption, but tell me if I'm wrong. And council is concerned about making sure the community development department also has enough resources to facilitate this development that's occurring.
Or new businesses coming in.
Exactly.
I think it'd also be important to look at, this is what you have full coverage today. We've had discussions, but we've never been provided a proposal that says, okay, in order for us to maintain the level of service that we're at today, these are some of the things that our police department will not be able to respond to. They're not going to be able to respond to you to let you out of your car. They're not going to respond to minor fender benders. They're not going to respond to what does that level of service look like, because I think at some point that's probably a discussion that we're all going to have, is to say this is the amount of revenue that we have and this is what we get for that level of service. And I think it's important to understand that, because that is a policy decision that this board will have to make. And the challenges are here, but we don't know, okay, in order for you to make it work, what is it that we need to adjust if we cannot find the revenue to pay the additional costs?
It would have, yes, sir, it would have to come to a sharp pencil when it comes to response to calls. Quite frankly, I've been trying to avoid that because I believe the people of our community deserve the quality of law enforcement that we provide now. And so it's a difficult decision for me to say, hey, you know what, when you pick up the phone, we're not always going to be there. That cuts me to the core. But it may be a difficult decision that we're going to have to make when it comes to prioritizing calls for service and whether we can send an officer there right away. Like you said, let people out of into their cars and lock their key. We're the only law enforcement agency in the county that provides that service. Minor fender benders, cold burglaries, cold car prowls. I don't know what that's going to look like because I guess I've kind of honestly been avoiding that because I don't want to cut services. I don't want to do that. But to face reality, I'm going to have to face that, and I know council is going to have to help me make that decision. But there are a few things that I could think of right now to cut as far as services are concerned. And that's a later discussion. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a harsh reality that we're going to have to face if we don't have the funding.
What percentage of our calls are calls to Walmart?
I couldn't tell you offhand, sir.
I'd like to have an understanding of that because I'd like to explore options specifically for what I would determine as a nuisance. I also think that's a discussion that we should probably have, at least in the Public Safety Committee. And I'd also like to have an understanding of self-generated calls. Calls that we are self-generating.
Well, some of those calls are traffic stops, street contacts, business checks, which provides that security to the businesses that we have in our community. Those self-generated calls are, I don't know what the percentage is offhand, but I can tell you those occur when there's a little lull in the action as far as our demands for calls for service.
Right. I'd just like to see what that looks like, just so we have an understanding of a true, what is the true call volume, and then there's proactive policing that's going on every day. And I know the guys do a very good job of doing a lot of proactive policing. But I'd really like to understand the difference between those numbers. what they
Proactive
look
and
like.
reactive?
Well, also there was a time in 2012 where we weren't counting certain things. Certain activities weren't going on. So if certain activities were not being measured, then all of a sudden in 2013 we started counting that. So you see a big shift in call volume, and it's simply because of an activity that we weren't doing that now we all of a sudden started doing. And I don't remember what that change was, but it looks as though once that change happened, the call volumes just went and ramped up way big. So I don't know what the change was that was in 2012.
New software?
I don't know what it was.
Or perhaps it might have been more,
I think it was new software. That's where we went, left from the old daily log thing, and it went into a different.
and it may have been an opportunity to provide more efficient data, accurate data for call volume, where maybe before it wasn't available. Technology has improved, so we can track data a little bit more accurately.
You see what I'm after, though? I'm trying to ascertain what is true call volume,
Yes.
and what are we generating on our own as call volume.
Proactive versus reactive.
Right,
call
and
for
I'm a firm believer in community policing. I think that's great, but I would really like to understand, and I know we're getting more calls for service. I know we are. I see the data that's presented. I know we're getting more calls for service. I don't doubt that, but I just would like to understand, what the difference in the two is. And is that an easy thing for you to do? I don't know if that's easy. I'm only one member asking for that information, and I don't want to, as one member, ask you for that information if it's going to take you hours and hours and hours to generate. Then I would leave that up to either the mayor or the rest of the council for you to determine that best way to proceed.
Well, I'll do a little research on that, sir, to try to find out how easy it would be
Okay.
to collect that data.
Okay.
Unless they change the program, it's not going to be super easy to find self-generated calls, because they're not listed as self-generated calls. You probably have to have somebody go through every report in
They're
the program to
listed
see.
under, they're listed under the violation of
Yeah.
crime.
Yeah, so, luck.
It's easy with traffic, because
Sure.
most
Yeah.
traffic citations, with the exception of a collision, are self-generated or
Right.
or proactive law enforcement.
But like a
Right.
drug deal, you wouldn't know an officer pull up on it, somebody selling drugs and making an arrest versus somebody calling in, an officer rolling up and making an arrest.
Right.
So until you read the report and, officer so-and-so would explain how he got to that point. But it's not just something you can punch in a computer and it's going to pop up.
And are you able to also dig into what that change was? I think it was 2012 when a change was made in the reporting as to what we used to call a call, what we apparently changed that terminology to allow more. Because there was a substantial increase, and it's that increase is maintained ever since 2012.
Further discussion?
I would say that with a caveat, though. I'm only one member of the council, so if there's not a majority of the council that agrees with that, as far as I'm concerned, you can ignore that, but I think it's something that we should be looking
I believe
at.
the safety committee was already kind of looking at it, so.
Okay.
Mr. Chapman?
I spitball here, kind of thinking, also, Mary, you might be able to help us too. Is there, like we said last year, the street fund we spent, is there anything projected in the future, next 3 or 4 years, that's going to be like critical mass that we know of?
Tracy has a number of
Tracy, yeah,
grant
might have enough.
applications that have matching
Well,
components to
I was
them.
thinking, if we don't have anything like Gold Pacific, it's going to be like critical mass, where if you
Oh.
don't do something now, where it's going to be trouble.
That would be, yeah,
Yeah.
question.
Or is it something like,
for Public Works.
there's really nothing where we'll almost be kind of like,
I mean, we drive around and we look at our streets.
no, I'm looking at, I know. I'm looking at something like, is there something we could hold
I-
off and kind of, instead of being so aggressive and rebounding, it's kind of take another extra year or two to kind of help.
And I know
The
that
funds the other
she's
way,
already-
or-
Tracy's already looking at those kinds of things. She's brought
Okay.
that too.
That's what I was
I
kind
think
of.
they did a street inventory and they have a rating on the condition of different streets and then the main
I'm kind of curious,
arterial.
there's something like it might be our last, we work on this, but not be so aggressive, as it, still get there, but in the
So,
next year or so.
when I spoke with Tracy today, she was indicating that her biggest concern right now is just minimal maintenance on roads, not large projects, but she's talking about, slurry seals and crack sealing and things like that. And she's saying that there's, I think she indicated 85% of the roads in Woodland have been identified being overdue for maintenance, a minimum of 3 years. So she's concerned with just getting that minimum maintenance done. And next year there will be more money for maintenance, and we'll have to put it towards that. But she hasn't talked about major projects, reconstruction projects, or anything like that at this point.
And when we talk about transportation too, Ms. Coleman, with those matching funds, I can think of, I don't know how many millions of dollars she's already, at least 3 million, I think that, and I don't know what our portion of that's going to be. But she has reached out to the,
Wilsh River Road sidewalks.
yeah, that's, and then another $500,000 grant for the park system, and so I know that, and I don't know what her responsibility is for that, which is a hard one to measure, because she has reached out to other partners and she's gotten some funds dedicated saying, hey, yeah, we'll help you out too, so we'll have to wait and see, and we won't find out until July of next year, I think, if those,
Yeah.
in June, July, if those grants will come through. So,
Is there any way, is there also, just to create efficiencies, if there's any efficiencies, like I mentioned earlier, the screw press was an efficiency that was gained. If there are any others, I would be very interested to hear what those are. And I'm talking outside the box. Anything we can do outside the box. Can we sell the naming rights to Horseshoe Lake? Can we start
We can.
Can we
We
start
could
charging
advertise.
for the, can we start charging for day use fee? Because right now, we're not generating enough funds in our park to maintain our parks. What are there, some out-of-the-box ideas that we can think of that,
without raising taxes.
without, yes,
Yeah.
which will free up revenue that we can use other places where we have expenditures that are increasing?
The only problem with charging the day use is you're going to have another person to be able to monitor that.
Hey,
We've already talked about this inside City Hall.
We at 21st Century now, and we can
Well,
create a
it's almost like an honor system.
Swipe,
Yeah.
swipe.
parking meters.
'Cause that was my question as well.
The only challenge is now you're using your police department to pay, on the weekends,
Mhm.
bill collector,
Yeah.
and writing tickets for that kind of stuff. So, I mean, everything has a
Ups and downs.
ups and
Right.
down, but
Well, and doing RFPs for, people that use the park, I know we've talked about this for a while, but, like paddle boats. Putting an RFP out there and maybe getting something in return for the city for allowing a private business to do that, or a bait and tackle shop, or,
yeah,
food truck, I don't,
maybe as a sponsor, they pay us $5,000 a year to cover maintenance. Something. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't have any other ideas on. After being here in Toronto, I have a lot of fresh ideas.
Because we have a lot of out-of-town people that use the park. A lot.
There are a lot of out-of-town folks that use the park, and that begs the question: do you charge a day use fee? I don't know. Just throwing it out there. Something to consider.
I'm going to reserve my comments.
All right.
Anything on ordinance, anything on food vending carts?
We're working on that now, and that's on Mr. Carter's plate as
I
well.
know those are ramping up pretty big in the like city corner.
Well, we have one.
They pull in like 4 or 5 different little food vendors come in. I mean, they're like packed. in there.
We have one that's looking to come back, so we're working with that
Okay, so
owner.
there's- okay.
So that's coming as well. That's something the planning commission, I believe, that's going to be going to the planning commission at some point to have a discussion about that as well. Okay. Anything else on the council input? Okay. Mr. Boyce.
Well, do we want to jump to committees?
Calendar? Budget and calendar?
So the Finance Committee is the only committee that meets on an off night, meaning not the first or third Monday. So one of the ideas was to have Finance Committee to meet on the first Monday, which is the same night Public Works Committee meets. And the question was, could the Public Works Committee meet at 4 in the afternoon? And
Or doesn't finance and government meet at 4 in the afternoon?
well, the reason for that discussion was Mr. Fredericks, works and has a job, and
And who's on Public Works? Me, that's retired.
Yeah,
We're all three retired.
but I can't meet early because I coach golf and we don't get up to 5:30.
okay.
So yeah, golf is important.
Golf is important.
Yeah.
Golf is important. I'll be attending Thursday.
And I really don't have an issue with it, except that I changed safety to 4:30, so that we could
Right.
So, Finance Committee is the only one that is the...
I'm available at 4 o'clock.
I am too.
Mr. Frederick?
Unfortunately, I am not. I cannot make that commitment because I would never meet the time. I barely meet the time as it stands now because I'm running to get there.
How does Tracy feel about meeting at 4?
One of the
she
things,
told me she's okay with it.
one of the challenges of meeting on a council night is we're sometimes trying to cram a lot into that 1 hour, sometimes less. If we have a workshop meeting, then we're bumping into those, so that's also another concern. I understand getting them at the same night and all that, but
Which time are you done?
5:30. So it's pushing it already. Yeah.
Doesn't sound like it's going to work.
So on
What about
the,
that second Monday? Or that second Monday, yeah, have we talked about that? Third Monday?
Third Monday, second Monday, that's what we're on right now.
so the third Monday, what do we have? HR and,
Public safety.
Public safety.
is at 4:30 and HR is at 5:30 and we did that, so Mr. Plaza could do both.
unless you have committees of 2. That'd be one odd.
I was going to say, what about if we took HR and Finance and... Wait, I'm trying to think.
What o'clock?
Yes, move them to first Monday for HR. Is that possible? And then moving Finance to the second Monday.
No.
Is that wrong?
Monday.
Third Monday, sorry. Third Monday, sorry. Council night.
Does that help?
Sounds
What
like
time would we meet then?
I don't know. Noon? Let me get out the piece of paper, stand by.
What time do they meet
Third
now?
Monday is 5:30.
Oh, you've got the list right there.
So HR meets at 5:30 on the third Monday.
Okay.
And public safety meetings at 4:30. We do finance
Me, Mike, and Ben.
And we run into the problem with multiple folks, again, we still have to, it's just not, the finance isn't going to work.
It's a nice shot.
It's the same folks. We're going to have the same issue.
HR is Benjamin Higgins. Finance is Frederick's.
It's your committees, so.
When do we pick committees?
Beginning of the year?
Beginning of the
Yes.
year.
Yeah.
I think it would be best if we alternated, so a different committee starting next year is on the different timelines, so
So it's not us always.
it's not always the finance committee that gets the second Monday.
Okay, that's fair. I see what you're saying.
And if we're gonna keep it that way, then maybe that's
So you
something.
put all of them in a hat?
Maybe that's
Say-
something that the salary commission can take a look at, because it is a huge inconvenience coming off on an off day for committee assignments for several of us.
So
If you've been
if,
coming in at 4:30 or 4 for public safety, then you don't have to be back here till.
I'd rather do that on the day that's already screwed up.
No, I'm
If-
just saying, it's still an inconvenience.
Yeah, it would be, but I'd still rather have that than the other.
if Public Works could meet early, except for me as a holdout, if somebody wanted to trade a committee that I could be on that doesn't want to meet till 5:30 anyway, that might help. I don't know if that's, I don't even know if that's a possibility, so. Throw the old guy out because he's just not cooperating. I mean,
Well, it's not nice to throw Mr. Fredericks out like that.
So HR and finance meet on the same, the second or the third Monday?
No, finance.
Not yet.
Second.
not yet.
No, we changed
You
it.
changed it. Then you had Frederick's.
He couldn't make
Between two
it.
runs.
Yeah.
And neither could.
I'm not present, I'm working on that.
Well, let's. leave
Doesn't
it
sound
at
like anything's changing.
Until
But I-
first of the year. I
Yeah,
like the
Mr.
idea.
Fredericks brought up a good point, keep it fair.
Yeah.
We can move one of the other committees to that second Monday, just to keep it fair.
Alternate.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That sounds like I'm the one that's on the alternate.
Well, I'm sure we'll be having that discussion again. All right. The only thing, Mr. Boyce, I wanted to go back to was the call to 2019 budget and calendar that we didn't go over. Can you hit that line item, please?
Okay, so we've put together a budget calendar. Again, when we hit city council, we're looking at October again. So I know there's been some discussion about maybe coming in earlier, but you know, I guess I'm open to suggestions. The earlier we do it, the more pressure's on staff to get everything in place. And we are changing format this year, so it's a little bit more work than usual. So right now we have, you know, as soon as October hits, we pretty much hit every meeting with the budget workshop. So, and, you know, past history is a predictor. You know, we'll hit all of October, November, and most of December with council workshops to get to a final budget. Is that sufficient time, or are there suggested changes?
Does that work for staff?
I'd like to go forward with the budget calendar as is, if I had a preference.
That's good to know. If we're gonna do that starting in October, we can have that meeting at 4:30.
That was it. Well played, well played. Mrs. Rounds?
Well, I was just going to say that if you're changing the format, it's going to be more difficult. I'm okay with the calendar as is.
It's supposed to be easier, but it's going to be more difficult on our end, I think, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's easier for us, but more
Easier
difficult
for us,
staff.
but more
Yeah.
difficult for the staff.
I think so.
I think this works for me.
Mr. Fredericks?
Do we anticipate receiving a balanced budget this year again?
That is the goal.
That's the
Yes.
goal? Okay.
That is
Why
always
would
the
you
goal.
even ask that?
I'm just asking, because it takes more time.
Okay.
So, it hasn't, sometimes we get budgets that are $500,000 out of whack. And then the show happens. Obviously, if there's if the expenditures are greater than the revenue, then there'll be a list of suggested cuts that the mayor's office will have for us to discuss, see if we're in agreement on. Does
Yes.
that sound about right?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds like fun.
Any other comments about the calendar? Or
Looks great.
our balanced budget that's been delivered the last 2 years?
3 for 3 if we get another one this year.
Goodness sakes. It's a rough crowd. It is a tough crowd, my God. All right. Anything else from staff this evening?
No.
Okay, anything else from city council this evening?
Mayor.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
Mrs. Ripp?
State auditors are on site as of today. They are planning on doing our entrance meeting on this Thursday, August 2nd. They've asked for it at 9 o'clock at City Hall. I wanted to possibly get a show of hands if anybody is able to attend.
I can't because it's the golf tournament that day, so chamber golf tournament, so I'll be.
Thanks for
Yeah, I'm going to just keep that right.
Otherwise, I would have been there.
And there'll be an opportunity to also attend the exit.
I'll try to make that, Mary.
Auditors can't meet at 9?
No,
Just check.
they leave like at 4.
Yeah.
I'll try to walk around the block, but
Miss Humber?
So, and I will say this at our meeting on Thursday, we called a meeting on Thursday, and 2 of our county commissioners and Mr. Bashing were just more than excited about the trip we did for them.
Good.
I was in Idaho in San Francisco
Okay.
here, but
I understand.
it was amazing. The only thing, like, ask if you please remember him, this,
Mike Karnowski?
Karnowski.
Oh.
He was absolutely like this.
Yeah, we-
I will make sure that.
It wasn't personal. We tried to keep it to county and above. Okay.
Yeah, but because.
There was that line of,
He wanted-
yeah, no, I know.
Anyway, and they all felt that we have a lot to do with that.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You weren't there.
No, I
No, I know.
Someone tried to suggest-
No, it went very well.
Because it was earlier than 4:30.
Yeah.
It was earlier than 4:30.
Right. Thank you. Agency requests, when are those due?
August 31st.
Okay. I may,
not
can those be
today.
brought to the, what's
The
that?
email went out today.
Due by the 31st. I may want to schedule some time at some of these agencies, like get a tour of their facility, go to them. I don't know if anyone on the finance committee is willing to do that with me, but I'd like to actually go and see what they do. So,
I can tell you that I think the Woodland Action Center would be a great one to tour. Mrs. Holland, the chair of the, are you director? Chair? Director? Board chair of the committee that runs the Action Center. I received a tour at the last meeting, and I would highly suggest that every council meeting go and get that and see where the funding has gone from the city and the good work that they've done with that. So
Yeah.
I
I'd
think
like
that's a
to- I'd like
fantastic
to-
idea.
I'd like to schedule that, so when you get those agency request letters, or,
Request.
thank you. letters, requests?
We can actually put that list together and figure out which ones can be
Okay,
accommodated.
excellent.
And then part of the agent's request relating to hotel motel tax, those can go to the
Right.
lodging tax.
Right.
Chief Kelly?
Council is welcome in my office anytime. Anytime.
He's an agency that's
During
requested.
regular business hours, and after 4:30, just so you can make it, Mr. Fredericks.
I think what you've done with your office is very nice. I like it. Looks good in there. I appreciate the lamp, too.
But anybody, well, of course, gotta have the leg lamp.
Gotta have the lamp.
Anybody on council, any citizen, matter of fact, I'm giving a tour to a family on Friday, so come on in,
You also encourage ride-alongs with the department?
for anybody but you.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That certainly wouldn't be the first time I've heard that one.
No,
You're kidding, they weren't.
anybody's welcome.
Starting to
And
sweat.
if they don't want you in their car, I'll put you in mine.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
As long as I have a car. Let's not go there. I don't want to talk about it.
I need to talk about
All right.
Let it go. Everybody needs to let it go. I wasn't even in it.
Coming to the section on the agenda for adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I don't know the time. What time? 7:26.